notes from last night, I gotta tell you, I was about to tear my hair out if I heard the phrase federal prosecutor from Christie or from Kasich when I was governor of Ohio one more time. Pretty sure Ben Carson might have been the first presidential candidate to use the phrase laundry detergent in a national debate. And maybe Chris Christie's tie turned blue from his hug with Obama? Joining me now is ACU Executive Director Dan Schneider. Dan, great to have you back.
Liz, you're making me laugh. I loved your comments.
Good. I'm glad to see you again. Now, I don't know about you, but I was disappointed by the lack of substance, the lack of policy in the debate last night.
You know, Liz, maybe I'll disagree with you just slightly. I did see a real change last night, a different direction that all the candidates took. Now, was it a deep policy change? No. But what I heard from every single candidate last night, except for maybe Dr. Carson, was an appeal to union voters, to blue-collar workers, some of these people who might be first-time voters who have been sidling up to Donald Trump. And I think there's a real concerted effort to use China as a foil to try to get people to realize that maybe the Republican Party is the better party to help these people increase jobs and increase wages. So I think there was a difference last night. It wasn't an obvious policy discussion.
Right, almost a reintroduction of the candidates, because now that Donald Trump mostly has gained so much media attention, different people might be tuning into the debate, so they might be reiterating some other topics they're trying to appeal from other angles. That's an interesting perspective. I didn't see it that way myself. I thought the moderators in particular, I thought they brought up a lot of gossipy questions that the mainstream media has been using as an agenda to try to bring down the Republican candidates. I mean, even the question about Goldman Sachs that they gave to Cruz, that was clearly, like Cruz said, a hit piece from the New York Times. What do you think of the whole controversy about Cruz taking out a loan from Goldman Sachs for his Senate race?
Well, look, we all know how the Washington Times, or rather the New York Times, of course, the New York Times operates in the hit pieces, and they'll time these things, to try to have maximum impact. But look, some of these hit pieces, there's a real underlying issue that needs to be addressed. And, Senator Cruz has admitted that he made a mistake. There may be some additional fallout from it. It might be over. The fact that the Fox Business Network brought it up, I think, provided Senator Cruz an opportunity to clear the air, admit where he may have made a mistake. We'll see how this unfolds. Maybe it's resolved now. Yeah,
my biggest problem with it wasn't that he took out a loan. I think that, like he said, he doesn't come from a rich background. He didn't have money beforehand too much, just a little bit saved from his career as an attorney. But my main issue was the fact that we already, as the American people, are naturally skeptical of politicians telling the truth. So when someone does something that even comes off a little bit as having shades of being sketchy, I think that makes me, at least, feel more distrustful of the individual. So that's my only issue with Cruz not disclosing that. But yeah, like you said, we'll have to see what comes of it. If it's something that blows over, that the New York Times just timed with this debate so that it would be a question, or whether it's going to be a real issue. They did talk about ISIS. I thought that was a pretty good discussion, one of the more substantial things that they talked about. Rubio, in particular, he talked about taking out ISIS by using the most powerful intelligence agency in the world to tell us where ISIS is, and then using the most powerful military in the world to destroy them. That was very eloquent.
Right. Yes, Senator Rubio is always going to be strong with his rhetoric, poetic even. But obviously, what we know is that the current administration has been very weak on foreign policy. And intentionally so. I think there are two different dynamics going on with the current administration. One, they want to spend as little money defending our borders and our security as possible, because the current president has priorities that are different from certainly the American conservative unions. And also, the president has a belief that America has not been a force of good in the world, despite the many examples that we can point to throughout history where the very values and culture of America have helped defend freedom throughout the world. But we've got a terrible president sitting in the Oval Office right now, and And we're looking for an alternative. And
Yeah,
Senator
and
Rubio
Jeb
made a
was
good
pretty
case for himself
critical.
last night.
Jeb Bush was pretty critical of the current administration's strategy on ISIS as well, but he was critical not only of the real opposition, the Democrats or our current administration, he was critical of other contenders on stage. He brought up Trump's comments about implementing a temporary moratorium on Muslim immigration until we get the problem figured out. And he said that that's a huge issue because we wouldn't be able to have allies that are Muslims because that's so off-putting to peaceful Muslims like the Kurds who will help us in the fight against ISIS. I thought he made a pretty good point.
Yeah, you know, Liz, I agree. I focus, I have a slightly different focus. There are great American patriots like Dr. Zuhdi Jasser who are standing for freedom, who fight hard for the very ideas of our founding. He is a great American patriot. He's also Muslim. And what we need to do is highlight the examples of great Americans who have found a way to live their faith in a way that's consistent with American values.
Right, and Cavuto brought up the example. Cavuto, the moderator, brought up the example of the doctor who's come over here, who's a Syrian refugee even, not just Muslim. He came over here as a refugee from Syria, and that he's trying to reestablish his life here. He asked Trump what his response was to that example because it shows that not all of the Syrian refugees are in fact terrorists, and what would happen if this individual was denied. And Trump said it's not fear that's dictating his policy, it's reality, that there are too many terrorists that are trying to disguise themselves to come in with these Syrian refugees to even allow these people in for right now. Is that going overboard?
Well, yeah, well, I want to just clarify one thing. Dr. Jasser is an American. He was born in the United States, and you know, so he was not a refugee. He was raised here, and he's a great American. The example of a refugee, there is a serious problem with the refugees and the refugee camps in the Middle East right now. Gallup polling showed that I think it was 15% of the refugees in these camps are aligned with ISIS. So a good chunk of these refugees are not fleeing ISIS. They may be nervous about Assad or something else that's going on in the Middle East. And so if we start to import actual ISIS sympathizers, that would be a serious problem for our country. So I am sympathetic to what Donald Trump is saying, but I would want to avoid throwing the baby out with the bathwater and turning a bad light on somebody like Dr. Jasser.
Right, I want to go back for a minute to something that you said before when we were talking about a different topic. You said that how badly this administration's done and that we're looking for an alternative. And I think the topic that they covered last night, one of the best discussions, was about Obama's gun control measures and what they would do instead and how dangerous that is for our country. And Marco Rubio even said the Second Amendment is not a suggestion. And he said if Obama had the chance, he'd get rid of it altogether. Do you think that that Obama would go that far?
Well, of course. What we know is that President Obama despises private gun ownership. The very people he has appointed to the Supreme Court and to the circuit courts of appeals all share his view that the Second Amendment does not apply to individuals. Clearly, we can see by his actions, he does not believe in the Second Amendment as the rest of America understands it.
Right, even at his town hall meeting,
has articulated
even at his town hall meeting last week, someone asked him about a national gun registry, comparing it to car registration, and he didn't even respond to that in a negative sense. He just said there's not a great enough consensus in our country to do that, which I think shows so blatantly what his agenda is, that he doesn't have respect for the Second Amendment, that he either doesn't understand how it protects our freedom as individuals from our own government, not from people outside. He either doesn't understand that or he just has no value on it whatsoever. I thought it was a bold statement from Rubio, but I thought he was right on the money. He said it how it is, and I agree with him. Dan, we are out of time for today. I appreciate you coming on, and it's great to see you as always.